Can you talk about how our thoughts like shape our reality? Like, why are our thoughts so important?
Mm. There's a wonderful TED Talk by Anil Seth, who is a UK neuroscientist. And the title of the talk is something along the lines of We Hallucinate Our Reality. And what's happening when you dig into the neuroscience of this is that what we believe ends up being the decoding template for all of the signals that come into our brain. So, your eyes see, but what it delivers to the brain is like all these like little pixels of light and color, right? And the ears hear, but again, it's just like all these like little bits and bytes of data flooding into the brain to be decoded and so forth, like with every sense. Okay. The primary function of the brain is to keep you alive. Right. That's like the amygdala, the base of the brain does that. And what the brain is doing is giving top priority to, is there anything in your environment that is dangerous for you? So that's kind of the initial scan, which is why people can be hooked so easily with fear, because the brain is literally wired for that, right? That's its purpose, is to keep you alive. But beyond that, if it first does the scan and says, no danger in this area, you're going to live today, but let's figure out how we decode this particular environment and all these environmental signals. The brain does it based on what you believe. And that's what Anil talks about in his TED Talk, right? So it is your beliefs that are essentially the template, the foundation upon which your brain sorts all of the data that's coming in, combines it on the basis of what you believe, and then delivers that information to you. So if you have a flawed or inaccurate or incorrect belief, that is going to be perpetuated in the reality which is being constructed by your brain, the reality that you experience. So, what we believe is so very, very important. And what's fascinating is that we tend to believe that we have all the information at our disposal, that what we see is true. And yet we know, when we look at like the light spectrum that the eyes can see, it's not very large. When we look at the sounds that the human ear can hear, okay, well, that's also limited. So even the senses that we have to pick up data about our environment are just picking up a narrow band of the possible range of data for that particular sense. So right then and there, we know that all the data we're picking up is actually limited. And now you combine that with a set of beliefs that creates an experience of a reality that is simply an approximation.
I think it's fascinating. Like when I look at other people's like Facebook feeds or like YouTube, I think that to me like is a representation of that, right? Like I think the system, the social media presents back to you what you engage with. So in a way, it's kind of like what you believe, and it just keeps feeding that to you like on a just
Interesting.
on a scale like we've never seen before. So more and more, I think it's you can kind of choose almost in a way the own reality you live in, and it being reinforced by what you consume every single day. So I know you're American. Could you talk a little bit about like maybe like conspiracy theories? How does that kind of fall into play? Right? Like we're living in this very complex system at the moment that it talk about like maybe attaching yourself to a certain story of what's happening, regardless if it's true or not, or what is even true.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, we're all trying to make sense of a rapidly changing environment. We're all trying to get our bearings. We're all trying to understand what is this situation in which we find ourselves. And what's been happening is that as soon as we reach any sort of understanding, then our comfort level is disrupted once again with more information, more events that are transpiring. And so naturally, as humans, we want to make sense of it. Okay? And we are wired primarily to react to fear and consume any information that hooks our attention. So it's quite easy, because biologically we're wired that way, it's quite easy to fall into paths of inquiry that trigger the brain in that way. Now, there could be, in those conspiracy theories, there's usually germs of truth. It's not like they're like completely out of left field. But as we sort through this for ourselves, what I try to do is keep a place of balance. I try to listen to a lot of different people and what they're saying. I'm also listening for the energy of how they're saying it. What are their beliefs? What angle are they coming from? How are they describing the story they're telling? Is it a story of separation, of antagonism, of conflict? Okay, those are usually some red flags for me personally. Okay. So for me, I am scanning to remain open, yet also trying to distill what are the nuggets of insights that I can pull that are resonating with me to find that greater truth. At the same time, Jesse, it's all changing so quickly that any time you get to an understanding or a truth, it's already rapidly changing.
It's funny, you go back into history, right? It's not like this is the first time something like this has happened, right? Like either whether it's a pandemic or
Right.
whether it's a big kind of world changing kind of change in structure and systems, people have always kind of gone through this. And it's interesting to look us being removed from the moment, looking back, oh, well, 100 years ago, it's pretty crazy that they thought this. Like imagine living in like Nazi Germany right in the middle of it. Like how could these people not see what was happening? I don't know if we would have seen it also too, being stuck in that, in that, being in it, believing that story.
No, we don't. We don't. I think we know the tale of the boiled frog, right? So the idea being, if you put a frog into a pot of cold water and then you turn on the heat and the pot slowly heats up, the frog will cook. But if you start boiling the water and then you drop the frog in, he'll jump out. So what happens is that we steadily become accustomed to our environments. We adapt to them. So we're not looking at them from this perspective, what you call it, like a more expansive perspective, or that, and then we tend to get more expansive perspectives when we look back on a situation, right? When we are kind of removed from the experience of it in the moment, when we have more cognitive capabilities available to us rather than being hijacked by the urgency and the emotion of responding to the situation in the moment.
So kind of circling back to complete this whole idea of like that we hallucinate our reality. So kind of the message in that is that it's really like an inside job, right? Like we need to be able to figure out us internally how to deal with this outside world that's constantly trying to shape our reality. What is our reality, like internally, and we have power to shape that, right?
100%. We're Each and every one of us has a different experience. We are creating a different experience of reality. And we have the capability to shift that. Now, undertaking that from an analytical standpoint, whew, my goodness, that's quite an undertaking. But the reason I like to start with the playfulness and with the idea of becoming lucky is because it shakes up some of those beliefs for us in a way that is delightful. It's like a diversion. Okay. But as you know from doing the lucky journal every night, over time you start to see that it's shifting your beliefs, that you are more in sync, that you are welcoming in these lucky coincidences, that you are in flow. And in your case, because you're doing it in the evening, you're now going to sleep
Mm.
in a great mood. And honestly, like, choosing to be in a great mood, that in and of itself is a radical choice. And it pays huge, huge dividends, because that's the energy that you're bringing to everything that you do over the course of that day.